Hi, my name is Jade-Johanna, and today I will be talking about the Cancer Alley in the South, Louisiana, and the environmental racism that is embedded within. When you hear the state name Louisiana, you're easily engulfed with the sounds of jazz music, the images of Mardi Gras, the savory indulgence of crawfish. You think of all the positive imagery that defines Louisiana, which makes it impossible to see what's really killing Louisiana, leaving it a toxic graveyard. Among the 50 states in America, Los Angeles is rated number 47 in ranking as having the worst health and premature deaths due to the exposure of pollutions and toxins. Through the PowerPoint, you will understand what makes Louisiana a living hell. So what is the issue, you ask? Along the Mississippi River to the Baton Rouge, a 85-mile stretch, petrochemical industries have taken on Louisiana's welcoming reputation and cheap lands to grow their businesses. The petrochemical company became a success after the dilapidation of the sugar plantation after World War II. They bought out the cheap land to have access to the abundant water supply of the Mississippi River, completely ignoring the fact that the area was already preoccupied by people who had previously been enslaved and are now free. Why is this topic important to us, you may ask? It's important because as criminologists and as sociologists, we must first become aware of the issues of the world. One of the issues being that the silent genocide that is happening amongst us slowly over time, which our government refuses to acknowledge. Through this PowerPoint, we'll acknowledge the health issues of this, the families affected, and the environmental racism, the social impact that the environmental harm has had due to environmental racism. Cancer Alley. This stretch of land is known as the Chemical Corridor, or more formally known as the Cancer Alley, as the strip is festooned with, quote, steel pipes, cylinders, and tanks, cooling towers, and flames from burning chemical waste, end quote, that poisons the air with strange odors. This area holds a quarter of the manufacturing companies in the United States, which being 1/4 of that. The town, Donaldsonville, has experienced firsthand the effects of the petrochemical pollutants. As the city is sandwiched between the chemical manufacturing plants and sugarcane fields, the citizens rely heavily on this employment, which heavily contributes to the health issues in their household. The consistent consumption of the toxins is triggering as an environmental health risk. Many of the residents within Donaldsonville do work at the power plants, because this is their only source of income, or the only income they can have access to. But even then, the plants do not provide these citizens with actual jobs, because later on we will see that the people, Donaldsonville has one of the highest rates of poverty in their state, because 70% of the residents of Donaldsonville is African American, who did not exceed high school levels and are living off of $20,000 yearly salaries. Many researchers would describe the city to have the highest rate of poverty, inexperience, uninformed, and sickness in the country. Demographically and sociologically speaking, it is seen that African Americans are being more exposed to toxins and put at risk of being exposed to these deadly diseases due to their lack of understanding and acknowledgement in society. Although the petrochemical company is a major factor in the health issues, sugar canes is unhealthy to the health of the citizens, because in the Donaldsonville parish, they annually burn the shucks of the sugar canes, which emits harmful toxins of carbon monoxide into the lungs of the citizens. And according to researchers, the penetration of these toxins is linked to delayed or only onset asthma, early deaths, and difficulty in breathing. This statistical approach shows the citizens of Donaldsonville are surrounded by toxins, and the exposure to these pollutions will trigger greater health issues than a student who lives in Greensboro. Overall, these people are being targeted because of the land in which they live in. According to Singer in 2011, not only is the air pollutants attacking and causing harm to the air of the citizens breathe, but people of the corridor are 2.1 times greater at developing rectal cancer from drinking the water from the Mississippi River. This cancer seems impossible to avoid as a citizen of Donaldsonville due to the Mississippi River being their source of water and food supply. And this study was also conducted in 1981. The further downstream you go, the higher the cancer rate becomes. This is due to the runoff of the world. We must take acknowledgement that the study was conducted in 1981. Now, as consumers are increasing, population is increasing, consumer demand is increasing, which means that the rate of cancer has probably increased in the last 30 years. In another study conducted, it has been noted that the residents who live at least 1 mile away from the chemical plant is 4.5 times more likely to develop lung cancer than the counterpart beyond the bayou. The excessive exposure to toxins are genetically mutilating citizens as the rates of cancer, respiratory, and skin inflammations are rapidly increasing due to the poisonous community. Another parish who has been exposed to the toxins is also known as St. James. This town takes up 258 square miles within a population with over 20,000 people according to the 2000 U.S. Census. Minorities within the cities make up 50% of the population, with African American making up 49.4% of that percentage. These residents believe that the pollution has secreted from the air emissions, causing their health to decline. However, their concerns fall on deaf ears as the government officials do not believe these minorities are being singled out or subjected to harm. This is ironic, as according to the U.S. Census, it is observed that there is no manufacturing companies where the residents are not of African descent. However, in towns where the census tracks 88% and 76% of African American residents, 6 out of 13 manufacturing companies are within their living vicinity. It is also noted that the companies are being built in impoverished communities, while communities that average a $40,000 stipend or salary amongst their residents hold no facility for manufacturing these toxins, while the poor neighborhood could hold up to 10 out of 13 of those located in this town. A popular plant known as Festuna plant has created 500 million pounds of toxins in the span of 15 years and is located in a town that consists of 88% of African Americans. From an environmental justice perspective, we must first acknowledge the bias that is implied through the governmental officials. Black residents' land is being taken away while their lives are being slowly snatched by the polluters. These petrochemical companies are quietly committing genocide while the black residents are not able to move out due to their lack of education and funds. They have to suffer until the government step in. However, they insinuate pollution do not play a factor in the health issues, so they would not acknowledge the deaths of the African Americans. This further fuels the racism of the country by stimulating an environmental racism that hinders blacks from living, that is apparent through the story of Sharon Levine. In the story of Sharon Levine, in the past 5 years, she has experienced 30 deaths of the close relatives, neighbors, and friends in her parish. The weekend prior to October 23rd, 2019, she buried her 2 best friends, one dead from cancer and the other dead from heart disease. And 6 years prior, she had lost the love of her life, who she said, quote, was a vibrant and healthy man, end quote. And she 100% agrees that the pollution had factored into his death. For 5 generations, Levine's family had lived in St. James Parish, settled by slaves in 1872. The land was occupied by African Americans until the first petrochemical company was introduced during her time in high school. Now in 2020, there are 12 plants within a 10-mile radius. She remembers the sweet smell of the sugar cane when her grandfather was harvesting. But now that memory, that nostalgic feeling is overtaken by the acidic toxins that she has no choice but to breathe. In 2018, she funded the Rise St. James project to raise awareness for the Death Alley. This land previously used racism to enslave, torture, and kill African Americans are now using the same land to enslave and torture African Americans to remain in a toxic environment due to the environmental racism and injustice. As we all know, history repeats itself. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, environmental justice is defined as, quote, the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people regardless of race, color, or income with respect or development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. This environmental justice movement was ignited to prevent environmental threats from deterring the social equity of African Americans who are chained to their neighborhoods forever. They want government officials to develop precautionary principles into their legislation to prevent damages and risks to their human bodies. The social impact within these environmental harm are immediate in the case of Louisiana, as it is prohibiting death and disease throughout the entire city. Also, respiratory factors being an issue. The term environmental racism is applied in this situation as African Americans are being suffering and being denied basic human rights and environmental protection of their lives. As a recap, we acknowledge that Louisiana originated, this 85-mile stretch originated as a town in an area where blacks were able to live and successfully build their lives after being enslaved for 400 plus years. For it to later be taken away by petrochemical companies being greedy and seeing that the land is cheap and living over the other black individuals. We later on see in the 1970s how the black individuals are now being harmed as their health is deteriorating, their cancer rate is increasing, and their lives are being cut short. And now in 2019, in the 21st century, we want legislation to acknowledge this through protest, through standing up, through people who live within these parishes to acknowledge and share their stories. Because through the environmental justice movement, we want to seek the opportunity to prevent environmental threats that is causing a demise amongst a race. So the question we ask ourselves is, how can we communicate the toxic genocide of African Americans to the rest of the world? And my ideas is to, one, address environmental racism and the impacts that it has on people of color. There are many people who are privileged that does not believe environmental racism exists, but if you share the story and live the story of these African Americans, you will understand that this is a severe issue that is detrimental to the development of our country and creating bonds within our country amongst black people and other people of color. 2, we must advocate for legislation to create laws to protect minorities and the environment. Plants must be held accountable for the deaths that they are causing. They must be shut down in order to raise awareness at the deaths within these. And thirdly, we must protest until others can join our battle. We go across the nation, we go across the world to share the stories of these African Americans who cannot even leave their cities or communities because they are confined by racism, their lack of education. They don't understand or know any better. But as scholars being educated, we know to share their voice for them. Thank you for listening to my research, and these are my references.